Every single basketball fan on earth has imagined it at some point or another. The two faces of an entire era, the two biggest rivals of their generation, finally on the same team, chasing one last title together. It sounds like a video game, and tonight on the show, Shams Charania said something that made me sit straight up because he was talking about the single biggest name in the sport being a free agent right now, and the team he connected to that dream was the Golden State Warriors. So stay with me, Warriors fans, because the idea of pairing the greatest player of his generation with Stephen Curry for one final run is the kind of swing that could define the last chapter of a dynasty. Here's what Shams said, cutting right through the noise. According to sources, with LeBron James a free agent and his future genuinely uncertain, multiple teams are expected to come calling, and the Golden State Warriors are exactly the kind of win-now franchise that could dream about adding him, the four-time NBA champion, the all-time leading scorer in league history, potentially teaming up with Stephen Curry to chase one more ring together. LeBron James, in a Warriors uniform, next to Stephen Curry. Read that again and really let it sink in, because if you understand that LeBron is genuinely a free agent right now, and you understand exactly where this Warriors team sits in the Curry timeline, you understand precisely why even the dream of this is so electric. Now, I'm going to be completely straight with you right up front. The money on this one would be extremely painfully hard to make work. But stay with me, because the prize here, the two defining players of an entire generation finally united for one last run, is exactly the kind of thing you simply have to at least imagine. Let me start with how this is even a conversation, because it begins with one stunning fact. LeBron James is a free agent, the greatest scorer in the history of the sport, his future genuinely up in the air. And reporting indicates the talks with his current team have been genuinely quiet, with no real offer yet on the table, which has the rest of the league watching the situation very closely. Multiple teams are expected to explore whether the unthinkable could happen, and LeBron could finish his career somewhere new. Now, for a player of this stature to actually land with a specific team, especially one navigating very tight finances like Golden State, a whole lot of complicated pieces would have to come together perfectly. But the simple, stunning fact remains that the best player of his entire generation is genuinely available. And for a win now team like the Warriors, that is absolutely a dream worth examining closely. So now let me remind you exactly who LeBron James is, even at this stage of his career, because this is the part that really matters here. LeBron James is, by any reasonable measure you could possibly choose, one of the very greatest players in the entire history of basketball. He's the league's all-time leading scorer. He's a four-time NBA champion and a four-time most valuable player. And here's the part that makes this more than a fantasy. He is still playing at a genuinely high level. This is genuinely not some diminished farewell tour version of the player. Even this deep into his career, he remains a brilliant playmaker, a powerful and efficient scorer, and one of the highest basketball IQ players ever to walk onto a court. He still impacts winning at a genuinely high level, night in and night out. His minutes need to be carefully managed at this stage, no question about it, but on the right team, in exactly the right role, he is still a real difference maker who can take over a game when it matters most. For a real contender, a player like that, available at all in any form, is simply impossible to ignore. So now let's talk about why this fits the Warriors so perfectly, because it speaks directly to where this team is right now. But first, let me make sure you really appreciate the magnitude of the player we're talking about, because it's the whole point. This is the all-time leading scorer in the history of the NBA. Let that sink in for a second. Across the entire history of this sport, across every single legend who ever laced them up, nobody has scored more points than this man. He's a four-time champion who has won titles in multiple cities, a four-time most valuable player, and a player who has reached the NBA Finals more times than almost anyone who has ever lived. For more than 2 decades, he has been the measuring stick, the standard every other star is compared against. And the reason this is a real basketball conversation and not just nostalgia is simple. He is still good, genuinely good. A player who can still pass, still score, and still read the game at a level almost nobody can match. Players of this exact stature becoming available at all, in any form, is one of the rarest things that can ever happen in the sport. And the idea of one teaming up with Stephen Curry is enough to make any basketball fan's jaw drop. Here's the situation in Golden State. We are in the final act of one of the greatest dynasties in NBA history. Stephen Curry is still absolutely magnificent, but the clock on his prime is ticking louder than ever, and the Warriors are coming off a season where they looked far closer to a play-in team than a true championship contender. And the one single thing this roster has badly lacked for years and years now is a genuine second superstar, a real co-star who can create his own offense, run the entire show when Curry rests, and be a true number 2 option when the playoffs slow everything down to a grind. Now imagine finally answering that exact years-long need with the greatest player of his entire generation. Imagine the gravity of Stephen Curry, the most dangerous shooter who ever lived, combined with the playmaking genius of LeBron James. Curry's gravity and shooting would create wide-open driving lanes for LeBron all night long. LeBron's elite playmaking, in turn, would create clean, open looks for Curry, and when one of them rests, the other simply keeps the entire offense humming along without missing a beat. And in a tight playoff series, exactly when buckets get hard to come by and the offense bogs down, you'd suddenly have two of the greatest offensive players in the entire history of the sport to lean on. Add in LeBron's invaluable leadership and championship experience right next to Curry's own, and you suddenly have a team built from top to bottom on elite basketball IQ and a pure culture of winning. For a franchise trying with everything it has to give Stephen Curry one more real shot at a title, the idea of pairing him with LeBron James is quite simply the ultimate swing. And let me go a layer deeper on that fit, because the two-man geometry is genuinely staggering to imagine. Defenses already warp the entire floor to chase Stephen Curry, sending 2 and 3 bodies at him, bending themselves completely out of shape just to keep the ball out of his hands. Now add the greatest playmaker of his generation to that picture. The instant a defense overcommits to Curry, LeBron is attacking a scrambling, out-of-position defense with the ball in his hands. And there is no good answer. Help off the action to deal with Curry, and LeBron picks you apart and finds the open man, or gets to the rim. Stay home, and Curry buries you from 30 feet. And when Curry rests, the offense doesn't collapse the way it has for years. It simply runs through one of the best playmakers who ever lived. Two of the highest IQ players in the history of the sport, reading the game together, covering for each other, taking turns dismantling you. For a team whose offense has gone cold in too many big moments, having two all-time greats to lean on is the ultimate answer. So now let's talk about how this would actually work, because this is the hard part and I won't sugarcoat it. The Warriors are operating in restrictive financial territory, jammed up against the aprons that limit how they can build. Fitting a player of LeBron's salary onto this roster would be extremely difficult, almost certainly requiring a complex, creative sign and trade and a real willingness to move significant salary and players just to make the money work under the rules. This would be a major, complicated, genuinely franchise-altering maneuver, no question about it, but the Warriors have shown time and time again over the years that they will get aggressive and wildly creative to chase a title whenever they believe their championship window is still open. When the ultimate prize is pairing the two defining players of an entire generation for one last run, the sheer degree of difficulty doesn't scare a team like this one bit. If anything, it only motivates them, but I told you I'd be honest, so let's take the doubts head on, because on this one, they are very real. The first objection is the money and the apron. Fitting LeBron's salary while navigating the apron rules would be extraordinarily difficult, requiring the Warriors to part with significant salary and depth. That's the single biggest hurdle of them all, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But difficult is not impossible, and the Warriors have found creative ways to chase stars before. When the ultimate prize is a Curry-LeBron pairing for one last title run, the difficulty should only motivate you, never stop you. The second objection is the age. LeBron is near the end of a long, legendary career, and so much of the Warriors' core is veteran as well. Pairing two all-time great stars this late in their respective careers is a very real gamble on health and availability over a long season. Fair, but you wouldn't need LeBron to carry a heavy regular season load. You'd manage his minutes, keep him fresh, and unleash him in the playoffs next to Curry. For a 1 or 2 year all-out championship push, that's a gamble absolutely worth taking when the potential reward is this enormous. The third objection is the fit and the shot distribution, whether Curry, LeBron, and the rest of the core can all coexist. It's a fair question. But Curry and LeBron are two of the smartest, most unselfish superstars the game has ever seen, and their games are wonderfully, almost perfectly complementary, one providing the ultimate off-ball gravity, the other serving as the ultimate playmaker and table setter. If any two stars in the history of the sport could figure out how to maximize each other, it's these two. The sheer talent and basketball IQ involved are simply too high to let any fit fear stop the dream cold. And let me hammer on the urgency, because it's what makes a swing this bold defensible for Golden State. The Warriors just missed the playoffs. Let that sink in. With one of the greatest players who ever lived still on the roster, they watched the postseason from home. That is not a situation that rewards caution or patience. Every single season now is precious. Another year of Stephen Curry's twilight that you simply cannot afford to waste. And the alternative to a bold swing isn't some safer road back to contention. It's very likely another disappointing year that quietly burns away another season of an all-time great's career. When you frame it that way, the real risk isn't taking a massive swing for a legend. The real risk is standing pat with a roster that already proved it wasn't good enough and letting Curry's final chapter slip away with a whimper. A team that truly believes its window is still cracked open has to be willing to do something dramatic to force it back open, and uniting Curry with the greatest player of his generation is exactly that kind of move. So let me tell you where my head is at, and then I've got one final thought that I think is the real key to all of this. If the Warriors somehow pulled this off, they would give Stephen Curry the ultimate co-star for one last run, pairing the two defining players of an entire era in pursuit of one more championship. Just picture it, Curry and LeBron on the floor together at the same time, one bending entire defenses with otherworldly shooting and gravity, the other orchestrating absolutely everything with genius-level playmaking, two all-time greats chasing one more ring side by side. Whether it works comes down to the money, the health, and the fit, and that's the real debate. But the ceiling of a Curry-LeBron pairing is a genuine championship and a moment basketball would quite simply never ever forget. And for a franchise that owes Stephen Curry absolutely everything, that's a dream worth chasing. And here's the thought I want to leave you with, the part almost nobody is connecting. We are talking about the two biggest names of an entire generation, the two players whose rivalry defined an era, possibly joining forces at the very end. The rarest, most fleeting opportunity in all of sports is the chance to unite that exact kind of generational greatness for one final run together before the window slams shut forever. The greatest player of his entire generation is a free agent right now, his future genuinely and completely open. The Warriors can't easily make the money work. That's the brutal reality, and the cost in depth would be steep. But the bold teams, the ones that believe their window is still cracked open, are the ones willing to dream this big when the moment presents itself. When you owe Stephen Curry one more real shot, and the greatest player of his generation is available, you at least find out what it would take. And the dream, however audacious, is sitting right there. So let me boil it all the way down for you, because I want this crystal clear. A franchise in the final act of an all-time dynasty coming off a missed playoffs with a years-long gaping hole at second star next to Curry. The greatest scorer in the history of the sport, somehow a free agent, somehow available, a perfect high IQ complement to everything Curry does, and the chance to unite the two defining players of an entire generation for one last run. The money and the apron are real, brutal obstacles, and the age of both stars is a genuine gamble. But how many times in the back half of this dynasty have the Warriors wished a true second superstar would fall into their lap? Now the biggest name in the sport is available, and the only question is whether they're bold enough to dream it. Safe already got them a missed playoffs. When you owe Stephen Curry one more real shot, the bold swing is the right kind of swing. I'm not telling you it's signed. I have no reporting that says the ink is dry, and I am never going to make something up for you, because the only reason you keep coming back to me is that I shoot you straight, even when the honest version includes very real concerns about the money, the apron, the age, and the fit. Those concerns are real, and this would be one of the hardest deals in the entire league to pull off. But I am telling you, the legacy is unmatched, the fit next to Curry is fascinating, and uniting the two defining players of a generation is the kind of dream that comes along once in a lifetime. And tonight, live on national television, Shams Charania put the Warriors right into the middle of that very conversation. But you stack all of that up, the talent and the once-in-a-lifetime storyline and the chance to pair the two faces of an entire era for one last run, and even with all the hurdles staring you down, you simply can't help but dream about it, can you? So here's what I need from you. Keep your phone close over the next few weeks, because in an off-season where the single biggest name in the entire sport is a free agent, anything at all genuinely feels possible. Remember exactly where you were when you heard this, because if it ever actually happened, you are going to want to remember the night the Warriors paired Curry with the greatest player of his generation. And tell me down below, do you do it? If you're the Warriors, do you move the assets and navigate the apron to unite Curry and LeBron for one last run? Or do you decide the money, the age, and the fit make it just too much? Because somewhere in the Bay tonight, a front office that owes absolutely everything to Stephen Curry is quietly dreaming about the ultimate co-star for one final title push. And somewhere out there tonight, the greatest player of his generation is a free agent, quietly waiting to decide where the very last act of his historic career will be written.